Welcome back into your Media Days Craze, powered by Gray Television. I'm Bailey Burmaster. I am joined now by Brian Milam, and we're going to talk some Kentucky football, not basketball. Although you don't like talking about basketball, despite the fact I have been told multiple times this week when talking to people, you know, Kentucky does the best they can. They know they're a basketball school. What is that? Is that really a sentiment that's felt in Lexington?
In the 20th century, yes. But since the 21st century has rolled around, you think of Kentucky has been to more than a dozen bowl games, which, again, prior to the year 2000 was unheard of. You'd go a couple of times in the 70s, a couple of times in the 80s. You go twice in the 90s. I mean, it was sporadic. And now Mark Stoops, he has been at Kentucky since 2013, his first year. And the first year or two, you kind of take your licks, while you build the program. He's been to 8 straight bowl games now.
Yeah.
And he has done a marvelous job. And I don't think anybody thought when Mark Stoops took over that at this point he would be the longest tenured coach in UK history, the longest tenured coach in SEC of the current coaches, and have the Wildcats in 8 straight bowl games. Nobody saw that coming more than a decade ago.
As he heads into year 12, what are the feelings Kentucky fans have towards Mark Stoops? Because he really has just been a sound foundation for that program.
Well, I think that's the thing. He is the son of a coach. Sons of coaches want foundation first, stability, solidarity, and then what the success will follow. I think when you look at Mark Stoops, he's a Big Ten guy now. He played at Iowa. He grew up in Ohio. He wants control. He wants to establish Kentucky football as more than just a school known for 1 or 2 sports. Baseball went to the College World Series, by the way, so it's wide open. But Mark Stoops has done a marvelous job, and he has been able, for a guy who doesn't like to change, I think, he has been able to adapt. He is still adapting to this new NIL world, as we all are. But he wanted to come to Kentucky and run an air raid offense. That didn't materialize, really. So what do? Ground and pounded, which is what he likes to do, is dominate that line of scrimmage.
Yeah, when you look at this team and what Mark Stoops has done going into this year 12 for him, what do you like the most about this Kentucky team? It seems like their defense could really be a strong point.
Well, that is what Mark Stoops wants to establish all the time. Yeah, if you score 40 points a game, great. But he wants to make sure that any opponent is 21 and under. He wants to make sure we'll give a cheap touchdown. That happens. He wants to assert the defense. And Kentucky, especially up front and with the linebackers and then Maxwell Hairston in the backfield, the defensive backfield, they have got some pieces here. And I think when Kentucky is its best, they are a sleeper team in the preseason. I think you look at the preseason votes that'll come out later today, tomorrow, Saturday, whenever, and I think you'll see Kentucky about number 8, 9, 10, and then by the end of the year, you're like, wow, they're number 5 maybe, number 4. They have always done that.
And I don't know if you feel like this, but, as the weeks progressed, we talk about all these teams, and all the storylines, whether it's Kalen DeBoer and Nick Saban retiring, whatever it may be. Something that's kind of fascinated me is the fact that Kentucky, from a bigger scale here, I know you're in Lexington, so you're covering them, but I feel like they haven't been mentioned that much. And that's weird to me because this is a team that you just said is a sleeper team and should not be overlooked.
But it's the way it is every year. And it's going to be that way until Kentucky can crack the Alabama bubble, that Auburn, the Florida, Tennessee, now with Texas and Oklahoma, it does not get any easier. But if you go back and look in the Mark Stoops era, he has had those big wins. Not enough, not what he would want. He wants to win them all. But he has finally broken the Tennessee curse more than once, more than twice. He's beat them. He's beaten Florida, ending a 36-year drought. I mean, so Stoops has put Kentucky onto the SEC football map. Now, where are they on that ladder? Again, as you mentioned, nobody talks about Kentucky. Mark Stoops wants it that way. Nick Saban
fly under the radar.
That's right. Nick Saban always talked about the rat poison and all of that. Well, Stoops likes to be the underdog. He's a blue-collar guy at heart. He wants to raise a blue-collar team with NFL potential. But, you're right. When you look at the first team, second team, third teams, whatever, you're not going to see many Wildcats. But at the end of the year, if they get what they want, especially if Brock Vandegrift can materialize at quarterback and Chip Trainum at running back, wide receivers are solid. Defensive line solid. Offensive line, for the most part, is pretty good. Linebacker, I'm telling you, they could be that team that, oh, yeah, remember back in July we talked they were that team that could win 8 games or 9 games? Don't be surprised if they do.
Well, and you brought it up, Brock Vandergriff coming from Georgia. He was really beloved in Athens, just obviously was never going to play over Carson Beck, who was doing a phenomenal job. What has been said and what is to make of Brock Vandergriff? Is there excitement with this fan base about him?
I think there's excitement anytime you get something new, especially when Will Levis came to Kentucky from Penn State a couple of years ago, and no one says, well, this guy didn't even play at Penn State. Oh, he leads you to the bowl game. Oh, wow, a huge game over Iowa. And then when Devin Leary comes in a year ago, I think there was so much expectation. I do not like expectation from fans and from writers, journalists, because we don't know what they can do yet.
Yeah.
Because he did not get much run at Georgia. But his dad.
And if he did, it was Ball State, UAB.
It was cigar time.
Yeah.
You know, it was like the cigar. We've got this one in the bag. So we have not been able to really see him. So I'm in the spring game. So I'm in practice a little bit. But until he gets under those lights and assumes the control of this ball club, everybody's going to say, what can he do? We'll find out soon enough.
Well, what would you say is the ceiling for this Kentucky team in 2024?
Well, for a team that has never gone to an SEC championship game, first off, there's been 3 years in the last 7 or 8 where Kentucky had to beat Georgia, either in Athens, in Lexington, to get that division crown. Didn't happen. I don't think SEC championship game, yes, that's the dream. But I think the realistic expectation, the ceiling, if you look at the schedule, and it's a loaded schedule.
Yeah.
I think that if you get to 8 or 9 wins, if you get to double digits, it's been a remarkable year. But I think if you get to 8 or 9, that is the plateau for this ball club. That depends on the health of the guys up front, as we say every year.
And it's a longer season. We've been talking about that all day. It's going to change things. The strong will survive in the SEC. What do I mean by that? The teams that have the depth and can withstand some of those core injuries that are going to inevitably happen will be the ones who end up in the SEC championship or that 12-team format playoff. It's going to be very interesting to see how that impacts teams. But I think for these not smaller schools, but these schools that have, you know, the Vanderbilts, the South Carolinas, the lower of the totem pole within the SEC, they're going to struggle if they hit some serious injuries. Do you feel like Kentucky has the depth to withstand anything that comes their way?
Well, time will tell, because it's funny you asked that, because I was thinking, standing off camera, in 2003, 4, and 5, Rich Brooks was the coach, and he said, defensive line is our strong suit. We are loaded at depth. By week 3, they were decimated with injuries. And the defensive line became a sieve.
Yeah.
I mean, just like, hey, just run it here, just run it, and you're gonna score. Injuries, that is the one asterisk that nobody in this hotel can prepare for. Because what if it's J.J. Weaver? Oh, my gosh, now you just lost your big linebacker. Yeah. What if it's Deion Walker? What if it's De'Aaron Jackson? What if Maxwell Hairston is burned in the back and turns an ankle and he's gone for 3 weeks? What if? That's the old if-in game, as coaches like to say. And but I think as of now, they have enough depth. And that is the one thing that Kentucky has struggled with in the past. They have not struggled with that over the last 6-7 years or so.
Okay, so you were talking about their record. I want to run through their schedule. Okay. And you tell me if they win or lose.
Here we go. So we're doing this.
We're doing this right now. Southern Miss.
Win.
I'll say a win too. We can keep scores. South Carolina.
Win.
I think they win too. Georgia.
Next.
They lose. Ohio.
That's a win.
That's a win. At Ole Miss.
That, I'm going to say it's a loss, but UK has played Ole Miss tough.
Trap game maybe a little bit?
Maybe,
like
we'll see.
But
we'll
okay,
see.
I'm going to say lose. Vanderbilt. Win.
You got it.
We'll go over it. At Florida.
Again, toss-up, because Florida.
It's a hard place to play, but Florida isn't Florida of the past.
But Kentucky has gone down there recently and won, so we'll see.
I'll give them a win.
See, I like your way of thinking.
Auburn.
I'm going to go with a loss on that one.
At Tennessee, I'm going L.
At Tennessee, got to give them a loss.
Murray State, I'll give them the win.
That's a win.
At Texas, loss.
Whew, that's tough. Going to Austin's not easy. It's not easy for anybody.
I need you to say it's a loss.
Kentucky has not beaten Texas since 1951. They haven't played since then. I'd say it's a loss.
It's a loss. Okay. And then Louisville.
Win. That is a win.
I'll go that too.
So what's that?
That's
7?
7-5.
And you've got an Ole Miss. You've got a game in there maybe that could slide either way again with injuries.
And that's I'm big on it. If it's an improvement from last year, you're trending in the right direction, and no one should be fired. Not that I think Mark Stoops will be fired.
He's
but you
solid.
get what I'm saying. You get what I'm saying. Like usually in other circumstances. So that's improvement in my eyes. And who knows? Maybe Brock Vandergriff goes in there and lights it up. We'll have to see what happens.
Well, his father's a defensive coordinator, and the kid comes out as a quarterback. You know, he's got a great head on his shoulders. We've interviewed him several times, and but a lot relies on some of the new pieces. We know what Kentucky has already, but will the new additions live up to what UK needs them to do?
We will see. Brian, thank you for joining us. Stick with us. We're going to be right back. welcome back to Media Days Craze, powered by Gray Television. I'm Bailey Burmaster, and I'm joined now by Elijah Campbell and Jay Phillips of the co-host of 107.5 The Game. You guys are professional yappers. That's what I like to call the radio guys.
Ooh,
you
wow.
guys do this for a living. I just am a woman who talks a lot.
Yeah, okay.
I'm just a man that talks a lot that won't shut up.
Yeah.
So, I mean, we can relate. We can absolutely relate to that.
You get it.
Yeah.
My running gag is report cards as a kid. Jay's a good student, but he talks a lot.
Talks
and
too
I'm
much
like,
in
you know
class.
what? Now look at me, all those teachers in 3rd and 4th grade.
Tune in. See what's up.
That's right.
It paid off. Annoying adults as a kid ended up paying off as an adult.
Now I get to annoy adults, so it's all good.
Yeah.
Now you get to annoy them by doing your hottest sports takes.
That's right.
And you've been in Dallas all week, broadcasting live. Biggest takeaways from the week as we kind of round out here in Dallas for the final day?
Ooh, my biggest one is that Texas, from a showmanship standpoint, from the adage of everything's bigger in Texas is true when it comes to the SEC. In terms of brands, they are SEC ready.
So you bought boots and a cowboy hat is what I'm hearing.
Oh, I'm from Nashville, man. Yeah, I already
So
had
you already had it. You're
boots
locked
and a
and
cowboy
loaded.
hat. Yeah, I mean, I
Okay.
was coming out of the womb, I was gifted boots and a cowboy hat as kind of part of the Tennessee native ritual. But the thing with Texas here that I found really fascinating, which the thing I was most interested in, was now that the SEC is as big time as it gets. Media days are bigger. They're more like, no one is showing Big 12 media days on a constant loop on ESPN, right? But they fit the mold of a program that is really big and commands a lot of attention. Whether or not they're going to be able to do that in their first year in the SEC, playing a full SEC
Because
schedule.
remember, they weren't doing that in the
Another
Big 12 until very recently under Steve Sarkisian. I
That's
just
right.
want to be very blunt about that.
Yes, absolutely.
And guess
yeah.
what? OU used to be that powerhouse, and even the recent years they had not, because of Brent Venables taking over and kind of growing pains with that.
Well, that's where I am, Bailey, on this. Texas, to me, is a lot more. Elijah's right. Look, Texas, the brand, and Texas, the alumni base, and the spending power is gigantic. So is LSU. So is Florida. What do LSU and Florida do? They ebb and they flow. Yep. They should always be great, but for whatever reasons, they're not. Texas is in the exact same boat. Meanwhile, here's Oklahoma, who I liken very much to an Alabama. They are consistent. They punch above their weight for the state that they are. Now, I know there's a lot of money in Oklahoma, too, but they've always had to compete, so to speak, against the resources of Texas, and to some degree, Texas A&M. And yet, which one's the better program? It's not even close, program-wise. Yeah. It's just not even close that Oklahoma is better. I think OU is more suited to the rigors of the in-and-out football because this is what they do. They have to go outside the borders. I tell Elijah all the time, and I've told people I work with for years, the program that recruits the state of Texas the best is the University of Oklahoma. And they find ways to make sure that they're better than you.
I agree with that in like a historic past sense of the last couple of years and so many years. Do you feel that's still to be true today with the you can't deny there is a trajectory for Texas and where they are under Sark right now and having Quinn Ewers. And
I think Elijah and I don't want to say we've disagreed slightly.
We differ a little bit.
I think,
love this.
listen,
Let me get in there and
this is
start
part
the
of what we
divide.
do. I think, again, you can separate program and team.
Yep.
The Oklahoma program is better. The Texas team in 2024 should be better. Let's find out. Again, with the folks, a couple years back, Texas is back, and Sam Ellinger and those guys, and they weren't.
No.
Are they now? I don't know yet. Yeah. They got to go play football. Is Oklahoma? Yeah, I've been surprised, and I've told Elijah this. I've been surprised by the number of people around the conference that say, I just don't know if Oklahoma's ready for the in and out of the Southeastern Conference. And I just think to myself, of course they are, but I don't know. How good is Oklahoma going to be offensively? Elijah and I were talking this morning off air. You got a defensive-minded coach, but so did Alabama. So does Georgia now. I say did Alabama, with Nick Saban, but Nick was able to evolve. Kirby watched Nick's evolution and knows that he had to evolve in Athens, and he has. Brent better follow the same boat, and if he does, then they're going to be fine.
We're separating. I'm sorry. Separating. Team from program is really important right now because if you just look over the last 25 years of Texas, they've rarely, with the exception of winning the Rose Bowl in 2005, beating Michigan, following it up with a national championship, they rarely have followed up success really well. And that's how you end up recycling coaches like,
Well, you have the Vince Young and Colt McCoy eras, and you're like, yay. And then Mac Brown almost wins a national championship. And then after that, what happens? Tom Herman comes in, and they're irrelevant.
Last 10 years, before last season anyway, what was it, 5.3 losses a year at Texas?
They were averaging it.
That's for what they and A&M both, and we're not talking A&M right now, but, relative to expectation and resource.
Well,
the
money
results,
that's thrown at the program.
Yeah, the results aren't there.
No, absolutely not. And I think Oklahoma's very interesting because when they were led by Bob Stoops, and then they had the seamless transition to Lincoln Riley, and he's this quarterback guru pushing out Baker Mayfield and Kyler Murray, everything's great. Brent Venables comes in after Lincoln Riley's very sour exit, if you probably ask Sooner fans. And I don't want to say that the standard has lowered a little bit, but it does feel like there isn't that edge at specific units anymore. You look back and you can look at running back, and they had the Joe Mixons and Chamaje Perines of the world, and, it's that edge isn't there, and it's the same with quarterback. Now, I'm not saying they're a bad club. Obviously, they're transitioning in the right way, but I think you're right in the sense you have to see what happens when they actually get into SEC play. Yeah,
so this Oklahoma team is so interesting, too, because they can be 10-2, and it's not going to surprise me. And they can be playing in Atlanta in December. The question is Jackson Arnold what he was supposed to be or panned out to be? And when you let someone like Dylan Gabriel walk through that door to go to Oregon, who has a really good chance, he might now be the odds-on favorite to win the Heisman, depending on whatever sports book you look at. If you let him walk, you better be pretty darn sure the guy that you have replacing him is going to make sure that your offense doesn't skip a beat, which is what tells me that they feel really good about Jackson Arnold. Now, we have a small sample size of how he was in the Alamo Bowl, which at times wasn't great. 3 interceptions, not ideal, but was able to make some plays that showed you why he was a blue-chip recruit. And if they have a year where he has some severe growing pains and has some really bad games against some really good SEC defenses, and they go 7-5, it's going to be an interesting dynamic between the fan base and Brent Venables because of what we've just established here, how great that program is historically. Since like the late 90s, they have not had consecutive years or even like a 2- and 3-year stretch where they're down. And this is a real possibility if this 19, 20-year-old kid who's taking, snaps can't get it done in the first year.
If there's less than 9 wins, it changes the conversation significantly in Norman because, again, of not just the expectation, but the factual expectation, if you will. I mean, again, winning 10 games is what they do, and even though the situations aren't the same for Oklahoma relative to Georgia a few years ago, they are kind of in the similar boat of, Georgia parted ways with Mark Richt amicably as best you can, while Coach Richt was winning 10 games a year and won the SEC 3 times. But what did he not do? He wasn't delivering the national championship, and Georgia folk knew they had the talent to do it. But for whatever reason, they were not. Kirby has unlocked that last little bit that needed to be done. Is Brent that guy? Because for all the greatness in the Big 12, it's been, 24 years since Oklahoma won a national championship. And that's a program that under Coach Switzer won a bunch, and before that, obviously. So while they are consistently great, they're not all the way up. And now it does get harder because
you're in the SEC,
and these teams play defense.
Yeah, and not to mention, if you are Oklahoma and you finish 8-4,
that's terrible.
That's not good.
Oh, that's terrible.
They're not happy.
No, that's terrible. Yeah.
And that would be a successful season in this league. A lot of
Correct.
teams,
this year. Yeah.
Let's take the University of Tennessee, for example, right? Yeah. I mean, they went from being sick and tired of playing in the Peach Bowl and being 8-4 every year to where, we got to cut, ways of Philip Fulmer, and then it took like 3 different head coaches and a fan base that was starved for about a decade where they would have given up a body part to go 8-4 in this conference. Yep. They would have done some absolutely foul stuff just to win 8 games in this league. So if you slip off or even just a little bit and maybe have some mismanagement of leadership, 8-4 may sound not good to them right now because of where they've been, but it can be a hard climb just to get to 8-4 in this league with all the teams that are in it, with the scheduling luck you're going to have because there's no divisions anymore. So scheduling is going to be a lot different. But 8-4 might be one of those things that Oklahoma fans might think of now and start getting repulsed. But in like the first 10 years in this league, 8-4 isn't as bad as because that can get you in the playoff now, depending on how the season
goes.
goes.
And there's going to be a couple teams from the SEC probably getting in that playoff with what all these schedules are panning out to be. Do you believe Sark when he says this is the deepest roster he's had this season?
That he has had? Yes, that he has had. And that's why I come back around to one of the things that we do agree on, the team versus program part of it all. I think Sark, like so many Nick Saban students, if you will. I don't want to say disciples all the time. Sark wasn't with him that long like Kirby was or some others, but he was there enough to realize, and we all know this, but if you don't have quality depth, you will not win this league. And you really won't even get into a New Year's Day Bowl scenario. You've got to have quality depth. And I'll liken it to what we saw at South Carolina under Steve Spurrier back in Columbia. I can remember times when guys would go down and the replacement was like just as good. And that's the rarity in South Carolina. That's why Carolina won, 49 games in a 5-year stretch. You had quality depth. You come to what Texas has, and maybe that's been part of it, Bailey. I don't know. I'll be honest. I follow Texas because I follow college football, but now we've got to follow them a lot more closely. But you look at what's going on when it comes to depth. If you don't have great depth, you will not win the SEC.
Before we get out of here, I want to know who is the quarterback you would choose in the SEC to be your quarterback if you got to choose just one.
If I got to choose just one, I think it might end up being Quinn Ewers. I think he might be the most well-rounded.
Over Carson Beck?
Because he's a better deep ball thrower.
Okay.
And Carson Beck, only about, 14% of his passes went over 20 yards. The offense doesn't need Carson Beck to do that. So it's kind of like the J.J. McCarthy thing last year. Michigan could win without him. They didn't need him to be great, but I think he can be in an offense that gives him the keys to be able to sling it whenever he wants or at will. I think just, to put a little spice on this, I think Quinn Ewers is maybe a little better bit of a downfield thrower. He's cut out the interceptions, and I think I'll lean Ewers here.
Jalen Milroe is the leading Heisman vote returner in America. And I love Jalen Milroe. I was a Heisman voter that put him on my ballot third last year. I was the outlier. I caught a lot of heat for it, but I love that kid and I think what he can do, how big a difference he made for Alabama. Now with the confidence that he has and an offensive-minded quarterback coach, I think he's going to do big things.
Do we give Jackson Dart any flowers?
Oh, yeah.
I'm a big Jackson Dart believer. I'm a Jackson
Dart
truther.
Lane.
No, you just like the mullet.
Yeah,
you're a hair guy.
I'm a hair guy.
I think you just like the
mullet. That guy might have the best hair of anybody that walked in this building this week, and that's an objective opinion.
True. Yeah, that's probably true.
And he had a really good suit too. But on the field, I love his dual threat ability. I mean, this is a guy that when he scrambles can pick up 7-8 yards constantly, and he might have the best ensemble of weapons. So when we look at this at the end of the season, he might end up having better counting stats, cumulative stats, because Trey Harris probably doesn't get enough love for being a Biletnikoff favorite, I would say. I mean, him and Luther Burden, you have the two best receivers in the country in this league, and I don't think the separation between Burden and Harris is that drastic, right? I mean, we cover South Carolina. We know exactly how important Juice Wells was to this Carolina team. And he transfers to Ole Miss, and he might be the number 3 or 4 option on this team. That just goes to show Jackson Dart might have the best embarrassment of riches of people to throw to than anyone in this conference.
Hopefully they can wield it into something special in 2024. Jay and Elijah, thank you guys for
Bailey.
joining us.
Good stuff.
We're going to take a short break. We'll be right back. Welcome back to your Media Days Craze. I am joined now by Dr. Katie O'Neill, the SEC Chief Medical Advisor. Thanks for joining me, Katie.
Of course, I'm glad to be here.
Talk to me about, you took the podium yesterday about just to update everyone on the status of medical and the student athletes and the surveys you do. Tell us about the latest work that's been going on with the SEC.
In the last year, our big focus has been our mental health survey and then also our medical timeout process, making sure that we're prepared for any sort of disaster that occurs on field or right off the field, and that our teams are ready in whatever city we might be playing in, whether that's a championship or just a regular matchup. So our medical timeout process, I really feel like we have that honed in. And then our mental health survey was put out to our athletes last September, got results back in October, and started to share those results to our teams so that they could make changes if they needed to make changes or really focus on things that we were able to show them that the mental health survey showed for them.
Yeah. How long have you been doing the mental health surveys? Because I feel like mental health maybe 10 years ago wasn't as widely talked about and discussed as it was, but it's really been, I think, something that's useful for student athletes now to be aware of, and always think about that for the future of yourself and just putting yourself first.
That's right. I think that mental health and wellness for the student athlete is something they really want to talk about now, and that's a culture change for the student athletes. So this was the first SEC mental health survey. The NCAA had put out larger surveys to Division I athletes, but we really felt like we needed to get some more concise information for our schools. We were able to send the survey out to all SEC athletes and then give schools their comparison. So how do you compare to the total population of SEC student athletes? One of our most interesting finds was we had a school whose student athletes said, "We love the flyers that the mental health team puts out." And so when we asked them, how do you get your information? This school particularly said, "I get information from the flyers." No other school had that kind of survey reaction. So we said, well, we need to get your flyer and let everybody else know you must have these amazing flyers. And it was a simple kind of trifold that just told some background about their mental health counselors, but really focused on what they like. What are their interests? What sports did they play? And it helped those student athletes pick the best counselor for them.
Yeah.
And they really like that. So those are the kind of things that we learned that we were able to share and hopefully improve everybody's program.
And what kind of questions are in these surveys that you're asking the student athletes right now? Because I'm sure as much as the game evolves, whether it is football or soccer or just basketball, other sports, it's ever changing. And so you kind of have to direct that with the survey, I'm assuming, as well.
Right. We wanted to know about what their perception of mental health, as you spoke earlier. What's your perception of mental health? Do you feel like you all have good mental health? Do you think that there are more resources needed? What's the difference between wellness and mental health in your mind, so that when we speak to the athletes about what we're trying to provide to them, are we talking the same language? There's so much that student athletes are keyed into every day. What's my schedule like? Am I getting enough rest? All of that plays into mental health. But when you say mental health, a lot of people tend to start to talk about suicide prevention.
Yeah.
So where on the spectrum do student athletes want us to meet them, and what are those resources that they're looking for? So a lot of the questions kind of geared into those sorts of ideas.
What kind of trends are you seeing now of difference maybe between the female athletes in college and the male athletes in college?
So our female athletes were far more focused on their schedule, their class schedule and then their practice schedule, and they wanted it to be routine, and they talked about the stress of when that routine breaks up, whereas our male student athletes didn't necessarily focus as much on the routine of their schedule. They focused more on the perception about mental health and changing that stigma. So different answers, which helps us, again, feed that back to our schools to say maybe you need to have two different ways in which you approach male and female student athletes.
This year, the college football landscape is shifting to a 12-team format for the playoff, which inevitably makes it a longer season. I had the opportunity to talk to Georgia head coach Kirby Smart about how that might affect their preseason. He said it's definitely going to be condensed and it's going to be different because injuries are going to be inevitable. How inevitable are these injuries going to be with the season being longer? I'm assuming there's facts or stats that can back up. The longer a season is, the more likely you might be to get hurt.
Yeah, I mean, right now we have individual schools data, which shows us that schools can trend their injury data over time. Anytime that you have multiple games in a row, you're going to see your injuries stack up, and then you have a break. You have your off week, and in that off week, lots of rehab occurs, and student athletes come back onto your roster. So how do you start to plan for that cadence as you approach the college football playoff, especially for people like Kirby Smart who are looking at, how do I need to look at my rehab schedule with my game schedule? injuries are inevitable, but injuries are preventable. And we've seen some of the best evidence come out of the NFL showing us how to prevent injuries. So we're taking that evidence to say, how can we incorporate that into the SEC way and hopefully prevent some injuries and allow our athletes to stay on the field.
What advice can you give to universities or athletes about, returning from injury if it does happen in the turn of the season? I think about a specific player with Georgia last year, was tight end Brock Bowers, who had the ankle surgery. He was trying to come back, but he wasn't necessarily fully healthy. How do you anticipate with the longer schedule and injuries, the feedback you can give of, hey, maybe if it happens in week 2, you should chill out because you'll make it to week 8, and then, hey, who knows what you can inevitably be a part of if your team gets there.
Right. So what we've been focusing with when we talk to the student athletes is, first, you need to go into the visit and define your goal. And you need to let the healthcare professional talking to you that day know what your goal is. Is my goal to play this weekend? Is my goal to play for the next 3 years? What am I trying to achieve? Because when you state your goal, we can make a healthcare plan around that goal. And that goal is oftentimes made with your parents. Made with your coach sometimes, but made often with your athletic trainer, who can then say, is that goal achievable? Like, I know your injury and I know what you need to rehab. So taking your team, your healthcare team together and stating your goals so that anybody who's seeing you knows what you're after as an athlete.
That's awesome. Thank you, Dr. Katie O'Neill, for joining me. I appreciate your time today.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
We're going to take a short break. We'll be right back. welcome back. I am joined now by Harold Grader, the Associate Executive Director of the AutoZone Liberty Bowl. That is a mouthful. That is the most I've had to say all day. But what a title for you, sir.
Well, on the last day, last hour, well done. Kudos to getting
Thank you for powering through, Harold.
Thanks for having me.
No, we're so excited you're here. SEC Media Days taking over Dallas. What's your interpretation of this new look SEC?
It's really exciting to have two of the marquee brands in all of college athletics come into what is no doubt the #1 athletic conference in the entire country, and to build on the history and tradition and the legacy of the Southeastern Conference with Texas and OU. It's in the stratosphere, and the best wants to play the best,
Yep.
be associated with the best, and there's no doubt now that the SEC is that. And with Texas and OU, it only gets bigger and better.
It's also interesting, the AutoZone Liberty Bowl is always usually, correct me if I'm wrong, an SEC Big 12 matchup.
Correct.
Now you have two former Blue Bloods in the Big 12 coming to the SEC.
That's right.
But the Big 12 also looks different. Does that make you excited for whatever this matchup could be down the line?
Oh, absolutely. Before OU and Texas came in, there was only one SEC team that had never played in the AutoZone Liberty Bowl, and that was Florida. Now we have three. Texas and OU have never played in our game. Now, this is year 66 for us. We're the 7th oldest bowl game. So as we look down the road and continuing our relationships and partnerships with the SEC and the Big 12, we hope someday to have
that little
Texas
rematch.
OU, and we wouldn't mind having Florida in our game someday. But these two fan bases, obviously, in our world, in the bowl world, to be able to drive to the destination, and obviously both Texas and the state of Oklahoma, you can drive to our city and experience everything that is Memphis in the AutoZone Liberty Bowl.
Something I was stewing over a little bit when thinking about the AutoZone Liberty Bowl was the fact that, when there was a lot of hard feelings when OU came to the SEC, leaving Oklahoma State behind because Bedlam is one of those big rivalries
Sure.
in the Big 12. What if there was to be a match where it was OU and Oklahoma State in the AutoZone Liberty Bowl, and you get to relive Bedlam a little bit?
That would be an interesting conversation to have. Now, would one side or the other not want to do that? You never know.
Oklahoma State's been vocal about they don't want to play OU.
But potential conversations like that are great for sports radio, for sports fans to kick that around. You never know. Interesting conversation.
Matchup,
we'll put that one on the memory pad there, should that opportunity ever come up.
How do you anticipate bowl season to look different this year with the fact that we're moving to a 12-team format playoff? It's a longer season. No one really knows what that scheduling is going to look like. Do you anticipate that bowl season will still have the drive it does despite there being a new format?
We think so, and Sam Pittman was very poignant earlier today in his comments about the bowls outside of the playoff, that we still need to focus on the bowls. And one of my points that I make with folks is there's certainly going to be so much exposure and attention to the 12.
Yeah.
Who's going to be in that 12-team playoff, the expanded playoff? But there are 70-something other colleges and universities that want to play in a bowl game, have those extra practices, have the bowl experience, have that celebration at the end of the year for a successful year with their fans.
Yeah.
So that's going to continue. Again, certainly the 12, there will be incredible focus on that. It won't impact us, I don't believe, as far as what we do mechanically, having excited fan bases and excited teams. We may all have to work a little bit harder to get some media attention. That goes with it. But we're going to be there. Speaking for the AutoZone Liberty Bowl, again, we're the 7th oldest.
Yeah.
We're going to showcase our city, showcase everything that we have to offer, showcase St. Jude Children's Research Hospital to the fans and the teams that come to our city. So that doesn't change. But we know that, again, that excitement for what is bowl season and the bowl experience, that is not diminished at all.
SEC Commissioner Greg Sankey talked in depth about NIL, the state of college football. whatever it may be, et cetera, et cetera. I'm curious, how has NIL impacted bowl games specifically? I know bowls, a lot of times they'll give prizes and whatnot to the athletes. Has any of that really impacted how these, bowl entities can operate?
Some bowls have been impacted
Yeah.
in these recent past years with players opting out. You can't avoid that. That's just a part of the world we are now all working in and existing in. I think what you were referring to are the gift packages that we all are able to give.
The TVs or recliners or watches or whatever it may
exactly.
be.
All of that fun, good stuff that we're by rule, we're able to do that legally and within the rules. As far as, again, the NIL transfer portal, opting out, all of that, we all have to deal with that. But I'm of the belief that when it comes to celebrating your team and the year that they've had, that you hope that key players don't select or choose to opt out.
Yeah.
But it's all about the overall experience for those teams, those players, with their fans, those universities, and all of the constituencies that follow that football team. Hopefully none of that is diminished, and so far it hasn't been.
That's amazing. That's what you want. You want it to be smooth sailing. I'm curious, when you talk about the AutoZone Liberty Bowl and bowl games in general, there's a lot of rich traditions.
Indeed.
What are your favorite traditions for the AutoZone Liberty Bowl?
Probably the number one for us is certainly the patriotic message, our founding principles of liberty, freedom, patriotism. But when it comes also to the Memphis community, showcasing St. Jude Children's Research Hospital, the number one research facility in the world, and of course they share their protocols with hospitals around the world. Very proud of that. And obviously in Memphis, it's about the food, the barbecue. But
the barbecue.
But we're much more than that. We're a great foodie city.
Yeah.
But it's also about the music. And it's not just about the history of music, Elvis and the 50s and all of that. We have Stax and the great history of Stax. And more recently, Justin Timberlake is a young man from our city. And rap and all of that stuff. We are what I would refer to maybe the United Nations of music. We have it all. Uptown Funk. My friend Boo Mitchell was one of the co-producers of that. That's a Memphis music product. So, there's a great history there and a legacy, Sun Records and Stax and all of that, but recent music as well, and current day music and current stars. And Memphis is a great music city, so we try to showcase that as well.
What is probably the best entity that the players get to enjoy when they get to be in town, whether it is the barbecue, the music? You can't go there without talking about Elvis.
Yeah, probably. The coaches may not like this, but probably Beale Street.
No, they definitely would not like that, but you're probably not wrong.
And Bailey, I'm sure they're just down there as an educational experience.
Looking around.
Yes.
Not partaking in anything else, and if they are, it's simply just a good water.
There you go.
With
Absolutely.
some ice.
And again, that all ties in the food experience, the music experience. That's what we're about in Memphis.
I love that. We are at SEC Media Days. Before we wrap up, I want to get your hot take of who's the top dog to beat. Who are the teams you're watching in this year's SEC?
Obviously, I think Georgia's the easy number one. I saw what Coach Saban predicted or
Georgia and Texas.
Selected Georgia, Texas. You got to think Texas, new to the conference. Not surprised, folks, but of the two teams.
Well, it's surprising because in the Big 12, they weren't the top dog always. Over the years,
Sark
it was
has done
Oklahoma.
a great job getting his team SEC ready. Oklahoma right there. As far as I think they will have four. I think LSU is going to be in the mix. Ole Miss is going to be in the mix, along with Georgia, Texas, Alabama as well. It's going to be an exciting year in the SEC, and the expanded playoff obviously gives more opportunity, and it's going to be a race to the end, and we look forward to our piece of bowl season coming up on December 27th.
Ain't that the truth? Well, thank you, Harold,
Thanks,
for joining
Bailey.
me so
You
much
bet.
here on the stream. We are going to wrap here on your 2-hour Gray television stream for Media Days Craze. That will do it for you guys. Thanks for joining us.